So, you're a mountain biker, and for a long time you wanted to do nice POV videos, and you got yourself one of these. Good on you. But now, if you did spend a lot of time hacking around, searching the internet and trying to figure out how to use it, well, it's time to stop. I'm going to show you how to set and forget one of these to get the most out of it for your mountain biking videos. So, let's get right into it. So, as many of you might know, this is a GoPro Hero 8. And you bought it for a very specific reason, and that is its incredible stabilization. Now, we do have to get a few things out of the way. How does that stabilization work? So, this is digital stabilization. You don't need a gimbal for it. It will do everything by itself. But there are a few drawbacks to that. This thing has an internal gyroscope. It calculates the position of the camera and in return tells the software how to align the footage to appear smooth. How do you usually shoot video? You take a camera and you use the 180-degree shutter rule. How does that work? You shoot at a specific frame rate, in my case it will be 24, and you double that, and the result would be shooting at a 1/48 shutter speed. So, can you do that when you want stable footage? No, because shooting with the 180-degree rule introduces motion blur, and that's what digital stabilization cannot have. In fact, if this thing were to stabilize footage shot with the rule, it would stabilize it, but it would look very weird. It would have jittery motion blur artifacts all over the frame. So, this thing actually does need to break the rule and shoot at very high shutter speeds. Here's the issue. How do we do that when we ride our bikes and we enter probably 8 million different lighting scenarios? Well, that's what I'm going to show you. So, let's get right into the menu and check what we have here. So, this is my bike setting. Let's get right into it. As you can see, I shoot at 4K 24 frames per second. I use Super View because I do want to see my handlebars in the frame. And I have obviously Hyper Smooth on. This is Hyper Smooth 1 because that's the only one that works with Super View. Let's move on to ProTune. In ProTune, you can see that I use a high bitrate. That's what you want if you want to avoid all the weird little digital artifacts when you move very fast. Shutter speed, we'll have to leave it on auto because we don't know the lighting scenarios that we'll encounter. Exposure compensation. This is one of the places where the trick happens. I'm telling my exposure compensation to underexpose by 1 stop in order to let the shutter speed be as high as it can be at that very moment. Another thing I do is to not limit my ISO to low settings. Why is that? Well, if I allow my ISO to run from 100 to the maximum of 6400, that is going to allow the camera to actually keep a high shutter speed even in those lower light scenarios. Now, what might be the drawback in that? Well, let's make an example with my other camera. So, this is my big DSLR. Look at that sensor. It's huge. Now, let's take a GoPro and put it right next to it. It's tiny. You would never fit one of those sensors inside. In fact, this sensor is probably as big as my fingernail. What does that introduce? Well, a lot of noise, unfortunately, but that is something that you will have to deal with if you want stable footage. Can't do anything about it. Unfortunately, it's a very small camera, very small sensor, you will have to live with it. But what do you prefer? Stable footage or noisy footage? I'll leave the choice to you. But let's move on. Let's check my other settings. I use a constant white balance of 5500 because I do ride during daytime, and during daytime mostly I will encounter the sun or maybe a little bit of clouds. And this is more or less what the white balance for those conditions is. It might look a little more yellow during a cloudy day, but that's not something that will bother me too much because I anyway do post-production. So if you're one that doesn't want to do post-production, I will suggest you to set it in auto, but do know that you will have color shifts throughout your video. It might vary from slightly bluish to slightly yellowish as you change environments. So, another thing I do, I keep my sharpness at medium. That's my own personal preference. You can set it wherever you want. In my opinion, I simply find that the low setting that some people use is a little too mushy. Color, I use flat because I color grade. If you don't, keep it on GoPro color because those colors are fine enough. Raw audio, for biking you don't really need that. It will simply increase the file size, give you a separate audio file, and if you don't really want to work with that, there is no need. Wind, definitely on. This thing kills wind extremely well, so that's one thing you want. As for the rest, that will be all. Another thing that helps to stabilize the footage is how you position the camera on your body. I wear a full face helmet, and this is how I position my camera. I use a little J-hook that's part of GoPro's accessories and mount it in a very hacked way to my chin. As you can see, I used zip ties. You can do it any way you want. Now, another thing I did is I put a notch in the J-hook and made a couple of signs on the little feet on the GoPro, so that each time I go, I know exactly at which angle to position the camera so I get consistent footage every time. So with this kind of positioning, what you get is an additional stabilization from your head, because even though we're not chicken and we know how stable those are, our head still does act like some sort of a gimbal. And that, in addition with Hypersmooth, is going to give you nice flowy POV videos. So this is going to be it for this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you did, consider subscribing and hitting that bell. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't, there is a button for that. But until next time, you can go check my other videos, and I hope to see you there. But for now, I have to go and edit this video.